Welcome to today's episode of the StrongTeams.com podcast. My guest today is Russ Olmon. He's the founder and president of Ministry Advantage, and Ministry Advantage was founded in 2001, about the same time as Ministry Insights. And Russ and I have done lots of life together over the years. I'd like to welcome you, Russ.
Well, thank you, Rodney. It's great to be with you, and always excited about anything you're doing in Ministry Insights and Ministry Advantage, our organization. You're right. We've been working together a long time, brother.
Well, listen, are you ready to get started?
Yes, I'm ready to go, man.
Well, Russ, golly, I can't think of a better person to have on our second episode than you. We have had a lot of water under the bridge. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Ministry Advantage, and kind of how you found yourself to become a pastor, and then why did you find Ministry Advantage?
I remember the first time I heard about you, my partner, Lonnie Ginger, called me from Seattle and said, "Hey, I met this guy," and he started telling me about what you were doing with relationships and leading from your strengths and the profile to help people understand themselves, their strengths better. And Lonnie was trying to really convince me that I needed to talk to you, meet you. And I kept saying, Lonnie, I really have heard everything I need to hear. I don't need to meet him or talk to him. If his stuff is as good as you say, every pastor I work with needs to know this. And I've struggled because I found most pastors are not as self-aware as they could be, and that what you were doing was right in the wheelhouse. So it's turned out that since that time, every pastor, thousands of pastors that we've worked with over, almost 20 years, I guess, close to that, has right out of the gate taken the Ministry Advantage assessment, and we start to understand ourselves and the people we work with better. So I'm grateful for you. It's been a life-changing experience.
Yeah, when we first met, I think even maybe on one of our first phone calls, I just remember the great humility that you exhibited. You told a story about you talking to God and God saying, "You know what, Russ, you're the problem."
Yeah.
And so tell that story. I think our listeners would be really encouraged by that story. And so tell that story.
Well, thank you. I said to somebody, actually, a guy I was meeting with yesterday, pastor, and I said, I think the reason that I'm probably have a little bit of humility is just because I've done everything wrong, and I don't have any claim to fame except I do try to learn from my mistakes. And the story on that you're referring to is that the first 5 people that I hired as a church planter, I fired or just drove away. And I finally decided to have a conversation with God. It was midnight out on the parking lot of our first building that we had built. And I think the 5th person that had finally decided to extricate themselves from me. I didn't see it that way at the time. And I was like, why can't I get good people? And my wife and I, Susie and I, had worked hard during seminary and college to work in other people's churches, not just to go to school and get head knowledge, but we said, we're going to serve while we're learning. And then, God, when we need good people, you're going to give us great people to be on our team to help us build a church or whatever you were going to call us to do. And so I was basically telling God, you're not keeping your end of the deal because all these people are terrible and they're leaving, or I'm having to run them off. So why aren't you giving me good people? And I felt like the Holy Spirit really that night said to me, midnight on the parking lot, said, well, why don't we look into this and evaluate it and find what's wrong and put our finger on it? And I thought that was great. I literally was that dumb. I said, great idea. And the Holy Spirit was really pulling me into a trap. And I said, okay, I started thinking through those 5 people. If I could find the common denominator, then I could fix it and not hire any more people like that. And pretty soon, the old thing where it was like that person, and pretty soon it was God was going, no. So the only common denominator in all of these people is you. And I said, no, that can't be so. This problem cannot be me. And so that night, honestly, I repented. I didn't know you at that time. We had barely started Ministry Advantage, working with pastors, and I was pastoring, building my church. And not long after that, Lonnie and I connected and started talking about this guy named Rodney Cox and leading from your strengths. And that was God's answer to say there is a way to sort of figure out who you're working with, to see the strengths in other people. And that set us on a journey.
You know, Russ, it's a common thing that I see in all the circles I run in. We, as you know, we primarily serve the church and help pastors build strong teams and and release their people. And so it's a common denominator that we see as well. What you're talking about, seminary teaches us really well how to exegete the word, right? But doesn't teach us a whole lot about leadership. But yet, the first thing that we have to do when we start our church and we start hiring people is we have to start leading. And yet very, very few of us have that acumen and have been taught, especially at the seminary level, what that might actually look like. And I remember us talking through that and saying, well, now that I kind of understand these principles, shouldn't all pastors understand these principles? What if I could hang out my shingle and be a practitioner, but not only a practitioner, what if I could actually help some pastors along the way that might actually find themselves in the boat that I'm in? And so talk a little bit about Ministry Advantage and why you founded that and what it's all about.
Yeah, well, you're right. Seminary, I'm always careful to say I love the education I got.
Mm-hmm.
If you go into ministry, and especially if you're if you're going to be the leader or any level of leadership, and you don't have your theological shoes on the ground, feet on the ground, so to speak, you're going to go out and there's going to be a lot of blood in the street. You're going to
Yeah.
mess up a lot of stuff and a lot of people because theologically, biblically, you just don't know what you believe yet. And so there's a real place for that. I've never argued against that we don't need education. We do.
Amen. Amen.
What I did wish was that they would have told us that when you're done here, you're about halfway ready. And that is not the sort of impression that I got. And I don't know how it is today, to be honest with you. I hope and think maybe it's a little better, but we really need to get that message. Like the leadership side of church, we don't get in seminary. Seminary is not the best place to learn that kind of stuff. You really have to be in ministry to learn it. You can learn
Mm-hmm.
you can learn the book knowledge. You can read books on leadership, but you have to lead to really learn to lead. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was having all kinds of trouble because I had been pursued by the church that we were in while we were in seminary. They wanted to start have a church plant in the area, and I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm not doing that here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not called it." And so I had two things going on. I had to wrestle with God first about who I was and what God called me to do. So pretty much everything I've done, I told God I'm not doing that until God said, "Yeah, you are." And so once I committed to start the church, the same pastors who were great men and great churches, when I went back to them after a few months of being in ministry and asking them a whole series of questions, leadership type questions about how do you do this and how do you do that, the message I got back then was, I don't know, I've never done what you're doing. I mean, you're leading with people who have not been Christians for generations. I came into existing churches and basically have just keep the keep the train on the track and maybe help it do a little better. And today I would say whether you're starting a new church or not, it's really not the point. The culture is 2 or 3 generations removed from
Mm-hmm.
biblical Christianity or even understanding how a church works. So most people
Mm-hmm.
today that are getting people in ministry at any level are getting people who do not know how to lead in the church, how church works or how leadership works. So
Right.
I think it's even more important today. So we started Ministry Advantage really to learn the things we didn't learn in Bible college and seminary. And at the time, we weren't even sure that anybody else even needed it. Kind of thought maybe I was the dumbest guy on the block, and I'm just the guy that needs it. found out that it was a really massive need at the time. Today, there's a lot of people doing, thank God, there's a lot of people doing leadership training out there. But what we're talking about today with leading from your strengths, I think that is a very unique system and process and experience and journey that I still think is really unique and desperately needed out
Yeah,
there.
right. Right. And just to be clear, leading from your strengths is really not about teaching a leadership principle. It's not about teaching you how to lead. At the core of leading from your strengths is really about discovering what it is that you have to give away. What is that natural strength set that God has placed in you, and what hasn't He given you? And then to help you as a leader simply give away what he's given you to give away, and invite other people strategically around you to contribute what you don't have. Empower them to lead from their strengths. And when we do that, we actually have more. You have what I have what you don't have, you have what I don't have. And when those two things come together in a spirit of interdependence and humility, we have more. And so at the core of leading from your strengths, it's really about relationship. You can have all the leadership acumen in the world, but if you don't have relational capital, you don't have what it takes to cover a multitude of sin, right? We need that relational capital because we're going to make mistakes. And when we make those mistakes, we're going to need our love for each other, our zeal for each other to be able to cover that sin and to do life together as we faithfully administrate God's grace as we give away ourselves in its various forms. And so that's at the core of what leading from your strengths is about. And so while we're on the topic of relationship, Russ, I think it'd be really, really interesting to maybe tell our readers the story about the time in which we sat around your table. And I think that might solidify this story of the power of relationship. Now, before Russ shares this story, and I know I'm putting him on the spot here, but before he shares this story here, what I want to say is that the principles that Russ is about to tell you about in this story, these principles are universal principles. They not only work inside of your family, inside of your marriage, but they'll work in every relationship you're doing life with, especially as you seek to build close-knit ministry teams. So, Russ, I'm going to throw it over to you. And I hate to put you on the spot, but hopefully you'll bring that vulnerability like you always do and tell us a story about the first time we sat around your table and had dinner.
Yeah, I definitely will, and that was life changing. And I'll be honest with you, that's where we really bonded as friends and people that know you and I, and our families know that we're more like family than just friends. And that started really during that time, because what you did and what your ministry in the area of strengthening relationships was transforming. You're right, to me as a leader, but to our family and in so many other aspects. I will tell you that story. What's funny is when I teach leading from your strengths, which I always teach, the initial thing I always teach every pastor to this day, every church leader, no matter what they're leading, every Christian leader, no matter what they're leading, it is this. It is leading from your strengths and the law of differences, which is so powerful. And that change, that transformation was me going from, as I said, the finger being pointed at me, for me understanding that everybody around the table had strengths, and I quit looking at people as you have a strength and you have a weakness, and you have a strength and you have a weakness. I sized people up. I pigeonholed people. I wrongly assessed people. I think you like to use the phrase, I was a classic person who was really leading and walking in ignorance in a biblical sense. I just didn't know how God had fearfully and wonderfully made people. And I went from seeing people as both strengths and weaknesses to I never think about their weaknesses. I see their strengths
Amen.
and what's missing in me and what's missing on the team. And I just sit at a table now, and for all these years now, since that aha moment for me, I just see little pots of gold sitting around the table. I get so excited because everybody here is different, and that is a strength. That's the wonderful thing about this. And then being able to have an objective way to understand those strengths and get folks to play well together and to serve well together, kind of like a well-run orchestra is how I see it. And that's how we've done so much together on our teams over the years. Well, you came to our home, you came to town, and we had not known you a long time, and I'd taken the assessment. I'd had Susie, my wife, take the assessment. And so we were just blown away by what we were learning. We had started talking to each other differently and sort of using language and words that, have to this day are kind of code language for us. And so we can kind of have that knowing look or just a word that helps us understand how to better relate to each other in the moment. Well, I had Stephen, my son, he's our only child, and he's a brilliant kid and a great kid. And I think he was about 12 at the time. And I said, Stephen, I'm doing this thing. And he is, as an only child, he wanted to be right in the middle of everything. And he wanted his friends to be my friends and my friends to be his friends. And he traveled with us around the world. And so we treated him that way. And so I said, I got this assessment I want you to take. You'll just do it on the computer right here in the office in the house. And it'll only take you about 10 minutes to take it. And then when I get the results back, I'll let you know what they say. Well, you and I both know that the results came back instantly, but I didn't tell him that because I wanted a moment. I wanted a little space to look at his assessment. So I still remember where I was standing. I remember reading his assessment, and he was in the house, but somewhere else. He had taken the assessment. He had no idea that I had the result already. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I think I'm doing everything I can to rear him right, to put values in him, to work with him, teach him how to work the way that worked for me. But he is so opposite of me, not just in his personality, which you could kind of see on the surface, but deep down, the nuances of how he's different. And I remember two things came to mind. If I keep leading him the way I'm trying to lead him and sort of forcing on him, he's not going to want to be around me when he turns 18 years old. He's going to be out and gone. And we're going to not have a great relationship together because I responded completely differently to leadership input and to guidance and to relational interactions that he does completely differently. So I realized that I have to relate to him different. And I was like, Lord, I don't really know how to do this. It was the first time I really had to do this in a real personal way. And so that week that Saturday was car washing day. And so my personality is, let's get it done. Let's get it done fast. Maybe we can get them done faster than we did last time. Let's get everything out, put everything up, and go on with our day. And I thought that was good. And that's how I was sort of brought up. And Stephen's like, if you can't have fun while you're working, then why do it, right? It's like, and I would say to him, I knew that, and I knew that sort of about him, and I would say, let's work hard, and then we'll play when we're done. Let's get to the top of the mountain, then we'll play. Well, the truth was, I rarely slowed down enough to play, so and a lot of times just went to the next thing. So that day we went out and we started washing the cars, and I thought, how do you do this? How do I relate to him in a way it's not natural for me, but I want to come into his world. And so I said, hey, go turn the water on. And he turned the hose on. And he came around the corner. And as soon as he did, I sprayed him down with water, which was so different because I'm goofing off when we have a job to do. And I remember the look on his face was, who are you and what happened to my father? He had this really startled look on his face, like, you've lost your mind. And then this great big smile came on his face. And it was like game on. And we had a big water fight and suds fight for about 5 minutes. And Rodney, the funny thing was, and I've related to him this way for the rest of his life. That one moment taught me how to relate to Stephen. And in the back of my head, this little clock started running because it's not natural for me, but I want to come into his world. You have this principle you teach where you say you can't change the way you want to be communicated with because God made you that way, but you can change the way you communicate with others if you love them and want to have a good relationship with them. And so I changed the way I was relating to him And of course, it works best when everybody you're working with understands these same principles and does that for each other. It's like a good marriage, right? And
Absolutely.
so anyway, we had a great time, and that clock ran in the back of my head. And after about 5 minutes, I heard this ping, and I was like, okay. Can we wash the cars now? And he said, sure. And we went to work, we washed the cars, and we had a great time. We put everything up. As simple a story as that sounds, it changed my relationship with him. And all
Right.
through high school as he changed, all through college as he changed, as he's become a very successful business guy. What I say to him, what I don't say to him, how I interact with him. I've had a lot more fun in life, Rodney, because of what we learned through you and through this tremendous, powerful tool and process and journey. So thank you for that.
Well, you're kind, Russ, and it's been an incredible pleasure to journey with your family and to be a part of Stephen's life. He is a fine young man, and
Mm-hmm.
just had the opportunity to spend a couple of days with him 4 or 5 weeks ago when I was there in Dallas shooting some video. And so what a fine young man he is. And thanks for sharing the story. You know, I want to talk through a couple of principles based on that story. And once again, if you're a leader or team member listening to this podcast, those principles that Russ just shared are principles that will serve you well no matter where you're leading.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the cores of that principle are, what does it actually look like when we esteem others higher than ourselves? What does that actually look like? Well, it looks like what you just heard, where what does it actually look like when we transform or renew our mind daily that we might test the good and perfect will of God, right? It looks like that right there, where I take something I thought to be true about the way I'm leading my son, or the way in which I'm relating to my wife, or the way in which I'm leading my staff, and I go, I am ignorant. I am doing this all wrong. This is about me. This isn't about them. And through the change of that mindset and starting to look at what it is that they bring to you that you don't naturally have, and you start esteeming that value, you start leaning into that value, and you start releasing that value, it will unite you as a family, or it will unite you as a team like you've never been united before, because there is nothing that unites two people together more than pursuing a common outcome. The problem is most of us are pursuing our own outcomes, not a common outcome. And so those are some core principles I want you to hear and take away from everything that Russ just said there. And I think they would serve you well. You know, I've been following a guy around for years now called Dr. Dale Tackett, and Dale takes this word love and he defines it in a way in which I've never heard before. And I'm going to share it with the audience here today. It's not my word. It's his word. It's his definition. But he says that love is the zealous, selfless seeking of another's true good. Let me repeat that. Love is the zealous, selfless seeking of another's true good. Can you imagine what it would look like as a leader if you were zealous and selfless towards the people you were leading? Now, don't take that as an indictment. It's not. Right? Take it as an invitation. See, I think that God gives great grace to those people that humble themselves, and he resists the proud. And the hardest thing for us to do as a leader is to humble ourselves and to say, the principles that I've been applying are not producing the fruit I'm looking for. There's something wrong with those principles, and I'm going to do something different tomorrow than I did today. That's what makes a great leader. And I hope that will be said of you if you're listening to this call here today. And so, Russ, we're talking a lot about ministry insights and building strong teams, and we've not talked near enough about Ministry Advantage. I want to talk about how you help pastors turn their vision into reality. How do you help them move from this place to that place? I love some of the stories that you tell about guys that were standing on the back of a garbage truck, right? Willing to stand on the back of a garbage truck versus be a pastor, like, I'm done with this. I can't handle this anymore. And so tell us really what Ministry Advantage does and how you might be able to help some of the folks that are listening to the call today.
Yeah, well, boy, I agree with all that you just said, Rodney. This is the word that always comes to mind about, and what I hope people that are listening understand. They say, "What if you're trying to understand what is this?" It is it is God called Rodney to develop, uh, a ministry and a process that's phenomenal, amazing, that transforms relationships. In a sentence, that's what happens. Every church I work with, every pastor I work with, every leader I work with, every family that I've coached and counseled as a pastor for almost 40 years, in a church of 17 people to being on a staff of 17,000 people. And, you know, is these principles are transforming. They will transform marriages. As I said, they transformed if my wife were on this, she would say amen and yes to what I said about how it transformed the way we, our relationship with our only child. I mean, you can't put a value on that. And so, you know, what we do in Ministry Advantage, in a sentence, is we try to transform churches through leaders. And so you know, the leaders are the key to what happens in a church. And these days, with the post pandemic and all this stuff, there's all kinds of numbers that are relatively consistent when you hear them given out. But I don't know, Rodney, what numbers you know, but I mean it's upwards of 40% and 40% plus church leaders are seriously thinking, feeling like they're not sure that they can finish in ministry, and that they could finish their life or their calling. That's why we started Ministry Advantage. In the days that we started it, pastors were struggling with, and church leaders, not just pastors, were struggling with the same feelings for different reasons back then. And now we're right back in a different time, in a different era, with different cultural dynamics, with church leaders feeling like this is really hard. And so the place to
Mm-hmm.
start is on relationships. You cannot lead anything forward if the people leading it are not united. And so
Yep.
the first thing we want to do is help people get united. So Ministry Advantage is really based on a few key passages in the Bible: Exodus, Moses and Jethro. And if you know, I imagine many of your listeners know the Bible pretty good, and know that story of Jethro saying to Moses, "Hey, there's a better way to lead." He didn't tell him he wasn't called to ministry, but he said, "There's something you don't know." And I feel very much about what we do in Ministry Advantage and what you do, Rodney. There's some things people don't know that can not only keep them. I hope listeners understand what I mean. I'm not being trite, but keep them in the game. This is the most important. It's not a game, but I hope folks understand my heart. But it's the most important game on the planet, because
Amen.
our bottom line is not dollars. Our bottom line is people and people's eternity. The only thing that lasts forever, God has told us, are relationships. That's it. Nothing else lasts forever, except God, obviously, and believers in heaven and that kind of thing. But nothing goes from this world to the next except our relationships and what we did with and for each other. So Jesus certainly taught that. And so Ministry Advantage was designed to make heroes out of pastors. We don't want to be the thing that people are talking about, like in a church or with Christian leaders we work with, saying Ministry Advantage. We don't necessarily want our name to be known. We want people to say, "I love being led by my pastor. I love being led by my church leaders. They have such great relationships. They lead so well. They've changed my life. I love this place and I love being here." What Jethro said to Moses was, "If you don't learn some different ways of leading, Moses, two things are going to happen." If you flip it around and look at it, he said, "You're not going to make it long term,
Mm-hmm.
and the people are going to become dissatisfied." And so I hate that idea that people are dissatisfied, because I believe the church is the most transforming organization on the planet. And so, and it's the bride of Christ. There's just, there's just nothing that I want to give my life to more than the work of the local church.
Amen.
And anything that strengthens it. So Ministry Advantage is we really had the conviction. A friend of mine said early on, Russ, what you're doing is people don't necessarily need another sage from the stage. They need a guide by the side. And so Ministry Advantage is about putting one coach with one church leader or putting, a coach in the environment with a church long term, as long as they want to go. We don't do contracts. We don't sign contracts. If it doesn't work, we don't think people ought to be doing it. But we have long-term relationships with the leaders that we work with. And so we help them learn how to plan, how to lead, how to organize, how to build teams, how to transform their culture, how to accomplish their vision and their mission, how to stay on track. All the stuff that we didn't learn in seminary, we kind of go right back to where you started, asking me questions today about what did we learn in school and what we didn't. And so Ministry Advantage is really designed in very simple ways and bite-sized pieces with a coach by the side to help church leaders succeed at what God's called them to do. We are not vision givers. We're the people that want to say, what vision has God given you? And we will do everything we can to help you accomplish it. And so that's what we're about.
Yeah, I've always so enjoyed spending time with you, Russ. Over the last 20 years, you and I have done thousands of seminars together, thousands of workshops together. We have traveled all over the world with Willow Creek Association. We've done some amazing things, and have really really seen pastors encouraged, and administrators and executive pastors really encouraged along the way, in teams. And I want to thank you for all of the journey. I want to thank you for that first phone call you made to me back in 2001. And I want to thank you for, all the vacation times that we've done together. And we're about to go do a vacation together again. Yeah, and, it's a beautiful thing, not only to labor together, but to play together. And I love you. I appreciate you. And I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your ministry.
Well, this obviously we feel the same way, Rodney. And listen, you can't get in a car and travel with people on a long vacation if you can't get along with them. So the proof is in the pudding, brother. And so listen, we love you. Absolutely. We love you the same way. I would say to anybody that's listening to this, there is no aspect of your life, family, or ministry or leadership that what you do does not apply and will not transform the people who are in it. And I've seen it time and time and time and time again, like you're saying, all these times. I think it's an extraordinary ministry and an extraordinary calling that God's put on your life. And anybody that wants to see their relationships be transformed ought to rush to whatever it is however they can get involved in ministry insights these days, and leading from your strengths. So God bless you. I hope the folks that are out there listening really build a relationship with you, and they'll see some of the exact same stuff that we've seen over the years.
Well, Russ, once again, I want to thank you. Every time I spend time with you, I always learn new stuff. I'm always encouraged, and I hope that our listeners have been encouraged here today as well. So until we meet again, God bless.